Kim Jong Il always cut a slightly bizarre figure. His diminutive stature and characteristic hair were parodied by some in the West. But for the citizens of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim was the embodiment of the state. Feared, loved, worshipped, obeyed. His personality was part of the country. His father was Kim Il-sung, who founded North Korea with Soviet backing after World War II. Kim Jong Il was just a little boy when the Korean War broke out in 1950, with the Soviet-backed North invading the American-backed South. After fighting ended, Kim Jong Il became steeped in his father's philosophy of self-reliance, and the North became ever more reclusive. The North and South never formally signed a peace treaty and remained technically at war, separated by a tense demilitarized zone. Gradually, Kim Jong Il was groomed for the top, making public appearances in front of cheering crowds. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, he was declared eternal president. So his son instead became General Secretary of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea. And by 1998, as head of the army, he consolidated his position of absolute power.
He will be remembered as a person who was responsible for awful things, for the existence of one of the worst dictatorships in probably not only Korean history but in the world history, at least in the 20th, 21st century. Yes, he did not create this dictatorship, it was his father's, but he took responsibility and he made sure that it continued for many more years.
He was known for his love of fine wines, at odds in a country where food shortages were common, while the dear leader, as he became known, is said to have indulged his appetite for the finer things. His people were literally starving to death. The collapse of the Soviet Union hit North Korea hard, suddenly ending guaranteed trade deals. And then devastating floods compounded the famine. Estimates vary for the number that died, but even the regime itself admitted almost 250,000 perished between 1995 and 1998. Some say it was more like 10 times that figure. But in the capital, the appearance of a successful state was maintained. An OTT subway, proof the dear leader would say, of the country's progress under his leadership. Kim Jong Il was well known as a film buff, here visiting the set of a North Korean production. His personal video library was said to include 20,000 titles, with Rambo and Friday the 13th supposedly topping his favourite flicks. In 2000, there appeared to be a thaw in North-South relations, the first ever summit meeting between Kim Jong Il and his then counterpart from the South, President Kim Dae-jung. But Kim Jong Il pressed ahead with his nuclear weapons program. The US labelled it part of the axis of evil in 2002. A year later, North Korea withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In 2006, the North conducted a nuclear test and test-fired missiles. It added extra urgency to the six-party talks designed to deal with North Korea's nuclear program. A breakdown came in 2007 when Kim Jong Il finally agreed to disable the nuclear reaction at Yongbyon in return for fuel and better relations with the US. But despite dramatically blowing up the cooling tower, North Korea seemed to backtrack afterwards. The deal appeared to be in jeopardy. The capture of 2 US journalists in the North Korean border sparked another crisis in 2009. It ended when the former US President Bill Clinton flew in and successfully negotiated their release, prompting hopes that there would be further engagement. Observers say Kim Jong Il will be remembered as a nearly impossible man to bargain with, stubborn and fickle in equal measure. A man who kept 23 million people in a totalitarian nightmare, one of the most repressive, reclusive regimes in the world.